Given the public discussion or the public participation at our last meeting, we brought to review the policies mentioned were the visits to school. Maybe not at our regular meeting, but definitely at the citywide PTO meeting, there was some discussion about that. So just like to review that. And also we have the essential visitor form just to look over and review if you haven't seen that. That's I guess that would be considered a regulation, not a policy, but just for us to kind of know what's going on. And then the emergency suspension of policy during pandemic, and discussion and update regarding the certified, non-certified COVID vaccinations for staff. So Kevin, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Give me 1 second. I will see if I can't figure out how to share the screen here. So as part of the agenda, as you just heard, some of the things that came up in our citywide PTO meeting on Monday evening, in addition to just previous meetings where we developed our COVID response policies, there's a kind of provision at the end of all of the policies, this opportunity for the board to repeal the policies at the appropriate time. And so it was suggested in those policies that the policies would expire, the COVID policies would expire at the end of the 2021 school year. That was extended just kind of given the timeline and time when we came back in school. We thought now would be kind of an appropriate time to review kind of where we are as a district. So in terms of a repeal, this would be the opportunity for the board to repeal the policies, from our collection of policies, from our policy guidebook. And we would kind of go back to the status quo, if you will. Of those 4 policies, these 2 are available for review this evening. And as Rachel mentioned previously, policy 1250, visits to schools, and policy 6114.81, and that's the emergency suspension of policies during the pandemic. So just kind of staying and keeping in order here, I will open up the visits to schools and see if there's anything specifically that the board might have an interest in discussing, reviewing, et cetera. Currently, right now, visits to schools are limited to what we had deemed as essential staff or visitors. And so the essential visitors right now are folks who are could be supporting school operations. And so, for example, I think one that I think many of our parents can identify with, and that's the folks coming in to take pictures for kids, whether it's for schools at 9-12 at the high school, or in our K-5 or 6-8 for picture day. So I believe during the 1920 school year when the pandemic first hit, no one was allowed when we first came back. So I'm mixing up my school years, the 2021 school year at the beginning, because we were not even back in school. And even when we came back in hybrid, we were hesitant to allow folks in the building. Just have a better understanding of how COVID is spread and that disease is spread. We've relaxed those rules a little bit. Obviously, there are essential employees that need to enter our buildings just in terms of contracted services. And so those folks have certainly been deemed essential. But the policy has been relaxed even more this school year. And so as way of our essential visitor form, we've had groups like Boys and Girl Scouts come to provide extracurricular activity support, and particularly in our K-5 schools across the district. We've had mentoring and tutoring programs. Those programs were allowed to enter the schools and work with students And again, given the governor's order, as long as they demonstrated evidence of vaccination status to be in our schools, they were also allowed to come in to work with our students. If not, they continue to work with our students remotely. Just some examples for the committee and for the community to better understand. I think some of the questions that are on the table now is if, number one, should this be relaxed even more, and or two, does a policy still need to be in place? And I think those are some questions certainly that we heard on the evening of citywide PTO, and I think a question that sits with the committee this evening. So I'll stop there and leave it up for the questions and discussion.
So are we still under any executive orders from the governor for restrictions in schools?
Yes, I mean, certainly masking is part of those restrictions.
Well, I'm just asking because I think that would drive our decision, I'm sure.
So masking are certainly part of those restrictions. Vaccinations are certainly part of those restrictions to start capping. Absolutely, two major ones. In terms of building availability, I think that varies from district to district. Building availability in terms of access varies from district to district.
Right, that's my understanding as well. So, and I know, you know, the policy says to the greatest extent possible, parents and staff are encouraged to arrange, you know, electronic means to conduct conferences and meetings, which some parents, you know, favor and others feel, you know, there's something missing there. There's a connection, you know, missing. There's, you know, they can't really see the classroom or, you know, seeing their counselor in person. So, so you have a mixed bag, I think, of feelings about, you know, having virtual conferences and virtual open house, things like that. And then, but I also think it's hard to have, you know, since our elementary kids are still not vaccinated, that vaccination is not available for them. They are still quite vulnerable. And so, I mean, we can't really have a policy, you know, that varies from level to level. I wouldn't think.
I totally agree. I am the idea of, well, depending on the policy. I mean, if we released the policy altogether, I would have probably the most concern about K-5, just given the quarantining cases that we have had. I would say that the majority of them come from the community. We are learning that because of the mitigation strategies that we have in place, we are not spreading COVID within the schools, but it's coming into the community, and then we quarantine from there. And so given our parent involvement at the K-5 level, and knowing that those doors are open for everyone, I would be very concerned about our most vulnerable grade level, you know, particularly in that respect. And, you know, and when I say involvement, you know, our families, whether they're walking their kids to school every day, whether they're dropping off lunch, you know, whether they forgot lunch, whether they want to go in and speak to the teacher in the morning. I think these are all of the experiences that we enjoyed prior to the pandemic that I'd be concerned about right now, just kind of given where we are with the vaccination, and it's not even available at the K-5 level yet.
Right, hopefully soon. I did want to ask him, you know, how you translate or interpret the last sentence, that these temporary restrictions shall remain in effect for the duration of last school year or until repealed by the board. So is that something we should change if we would want this to be extended throughout the school year?
Right. I think, you know, part of what is your struggle here is that I sometimes think, particularly in the pandemic situation that we're in now, where everything is so unexpected and it's changing so quickly, you're trying to kind of create the roadmap with the sands constantly shifting under you. And so, my recommendation has always been over time that, um, if you want to do regulations or guidelines that are easily kind of put in place, taken apart, that's far preferable to having to go through the required machination of passing a policy, repealing a policy. So that's kind of my first overarching thought. And as I'm listening to you speak, I can kind of hear it revealed exactly there. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking, gee, the governor is now about to change his guidance on children and quarantining, and that will be any day now. And that's something that's very different than what we had 10 days ago. So that said, I think, as a policy, this is I consider policies to be forever written in stone, and am not always comfortable with their automatic expiration, because I do think that probably the proper legal way to do it is to say until affirmatively repealed, or to say nothing and to have the board make a motion to affirmatively repeal. So sometimes, when you put that automatic expiration, I think there is an argument to be made that you're going to have something slip out of being protocol and past policy, maybe inadvertently to some members of your board who aren't thinking about, the expiration of timelines. So kind of as an overarching legal matter, I would always advise either to stick with regulations, or if you're going to do a policy like this, to leave it, in place, set in stone forever, or until such time as you decide to vote to remove it. So that that's a long way of saying, Rachel, that last sentence makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Not, it's not like it's illegal, but I think it creates some obstacles that you don't necessarily want to have to deal with.
And confusion.
Yeah,
For me,
sure.
it's confusing.
For sure. For sure.
And this was the CABE recommendation last year.
Mhm.
They gave a ton of recommendations.
Yeah.
When the world shut down in March of 2020, all of our policies were affected.
Right.
So
right.
to cover ourselves, they recommended, the four COVID policies that we adopted.
Yeah.
So with that last sentence, should, do you recommend any action to be taken on this?
Well, I would recommend that you strike out that last sentence, because it doesn't contain whichever sooner or whichever's later. So I'm not really sure when that policy, it's in effect for the duration or until it's repealed. So at the end of 2021, did it expire? Or I think it's vague. And you often will see, whichever is earlier or whichever is later or something like that, some kind of a marker. So I would recommend probably that you strike that out. Even just the paragraph above about symptom screening. I don't even think we're doing that now, symptom screening people that come in. The one other thing that I do want to say, though, is that that's okay to the extent that if there are executive orders that issue, those orders will always control whether this policy is controversial to it or not. The
Yeah.
executive order is always going to control regardless. And you
Right.
don't really need to go back and amend to comply with an executive order, because you don't really, by the time you do it, it'll be expired again. So
Yeah. But I don't believe that there is, an executive order to visitors, to school visitors.
no, I
Yeah.
don't believe there is either.
So it's just our policy.
Yep.
So,
But I consider taking that last sentence out, or writing whichever's later, language that says, or until repealed by the school board, whichever should be later or whichever should be first. I don't know which you prefer.
yeah, I think, or until
Yeah.
repealed by the school board.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Or just strike the whole thing? I think I heard.
Yep. Either way.
And then, and Kim, to your point, this is really not, although the screening after this week will something that will be introduced, but I don't know if this makes sense, because this is going to continue to change. And I don't know if it makes sense for policy. To your point that you made earlier.
So let's strike that out as well.
Yeah.
Any thoughts from committee members? No, okay. And would we need to approve this with the strikeouts? Yes.
Because it's a change to the content of the policy.
Okay.
Which is why it's Kim's recommendations to make it as broad as possible, so we don't have to keep doing this.
Right.
Right.
Or make it a regulation that supports an underlying policy. Then you can, theoretically, you can work with the superintendent to change them or tweak them however you choose without bringing it back around because it's an implementing regulation.
I don't want to repeal the whole thing though, and because then that looks,
Mhm.
that would appear that we're saying all buildings are open, right?
Yeah. The other thing you could do, honestly, is you could approve these changes, which really kind of make it a little bit more generic. And then if you feel that as time goes on, you want something in writing that says, something that you're talking about, either, more detailed access to building or something, you could put that together as a regulation that sits behind this policy, right?
Mhm.
And then you can change it and tweak it however you want to, and as
Mhm.
often as you want to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are committee members okay with that? Do I need a motion to bring this to the full board as presented? Yes.
I think.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Kate.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kathy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okey-doke. Could we just review then the essential visitor form? I kind of viewed that as the regulation that's set by the superintendent.
Right, so just,
And one of the issues is it's I think there's confusion about what's acceptable and what's not, and just to make sure that there's a level playing field for whatever or whoever wants to come and have a PTO meeting or an event, what have you.
right, and I think the events vary from event to event. And the PTO meetings, Rachel, you might recall, I had asked citywide PTO to submit something on behalf of all the PTOs. And I did speak with them again last Monday, but requests have come in from individual schools and well in the meantime. But I feel like just kind of given how what we've learned again about the pandemic, we can do this safely because these meetings occur after school when school is over. And, the principal can hold these in spaces where there's, plenty of ventilation and staff and families and the principal can meet and make sure everyone is safe. So we have approved these as these requests have come in.
And what is the proper avenue for like a PTO, say? Do they go through the principal first and then the principal submits it to you, or?
Right, so it's easiest, and this is why I was recommending, and not this meeting, but I believe the October meeting, that citywide PTO do it on behalf of all of them, so that we don't have to continue to get different requests, because it just makes it easy for everyone.
Mhm.
And then we can just, make the principals aware that it's okay and just give them the check. But what they would do is it would be the PTO themselves, and they would submit it to this address right here. And that's to Deb Stanton. On behalf of the Assistant Superintendent's Office, it will come to me. In absence of Assistant Superintendent, I sign off. And then, we continue to keep it moving so folks can have the access that they need. And then, custodial staff and whoever is made aware. So folks have access to the building.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions from committee members as to the form?
I have a quick question, please.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Mr. Wilson, I just want to clarify that obviously for the PTOs to have one group handing it to you all at once is great. Would this be the process for every person who's submitting the essential visitors form? You know, even on like a just a single visit?
No. So if it's, let's just say I want to speak to my child's principal and I wanted to visit and, you know, it was a very important meeting, for an example. It felt like it was necessary to meet in person. That request would go directly to the principal. The principals, you know, are more than capable of setting up meetings to ensure everyone's safety. The majority of their meetings take place outside, and the majority of those meetings take place remotely. If for some reason it rises to the level where it's necessary to be in person, you know, we've had some situations where that has happened, but the majority of the cases have been the meetings that have been remote. And just as an example, we know how formal, as an example, our IEP meetings are for students and families. The majority of those meetings have been held remotely. And, you know, there's some cases where they might have to be in person, and we've made exceptions in those cases. So whether it's a, you know, IEP meeting, individual education plan meeting, or a meeting that just rises to the level that requires people to be in person, by policy, our principals have that authority. If it's a really big deal, they'll give my office a call. But if it's bigger groups, then that definitely requires a call. And in those instances, we definitely would encourage people to fill out the form if this is a reoccurring visit. You know, that kind of situation.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, thoughts? Okay. Great, thank you. I just wanted to, you know, the chance for the committee to see that form.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then that was the form. The last item is the emergency suspension of policies during the pandemic. At the time, this was very necessary. I believe when these policies were passed, the boards the meetings were not happening in the beginning. If they were not happening consistently. They certainly were not happening in person. You know, there was significant latitude on how many days of school would actually occur. There's a rigorous, comprehensive bidding process that has to take place typically. Where in the pandemic, you may want your superintendent to be authorized to make decisions without going through that process. And so the emergency suspension of policies allowed and authorized your superintendent to make those moves without going through those processes. So we thought it would be appropriate to make sure this was available for review this evening and see if it's still necessary. So that's what this is about. Just make this bigger so you can.
Right. And with or without this policy, I think I've said this before, but you know, the changes in learning models would have always been, you know, the decision of the superintendent. You know, I saw this as a way to interject, you know, the board in that decision-making process when it says, you know, that the decisions would be made in consultation with the board. But, you know, with or without it, you know, the superintendent had the power to make those decisions. And so my feeling is that this could be repealed. I don't know what that process is. That's why, you know, I requested that be on the agenda so we could, you know, talk about what that process looks like. And so I think it's time to retire this. But I will open the floor for your thoughts, comments, questions.
Can you hear me? It's Kathy.
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
Kath.
I agree. I think it's time to repeal it.
I have no objection to it either, to sunsetting it.
Mhm. This also has that clause right at the bottom, Kevin. It says, or am I mistaken? No. Oh yeah, there it is. It will remain in effect for the duration of the 2021 school year or until repealed by the board.
Well, it doesn't matter what it says if we're going to repeal the whole thing.
Right, right. So Kim, how do we do that?
How do you repeal it?
Yeah.
I think you would probably you would make a motion you bring it to the full board and you would make a motion simply to repeal policy number 6114.81.
Okay,
And then you'd have a discussion and your group would recommend the reasons why, and then you'd have a vote.
okay. So I will ask for a motion to recommend that this be repealed.
Motion to
Kathy, was that
repeal,
you?
sorry. Yes,
Oh, Catherine.
Catherine.
Catherine, thank you.
sorry.
And I can second it for her.
Seconded it by Kathy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okey doke.
All right, thank you. And so the last one is a discussion update regarding certified and non-certified required vaccinations. I know Kim has shared some of these expectations a couple of times at the board meeting, or at least the last time at the board meeting. But we thought it was necessary to speak to this in policy. Number one, speak to why we don't think it should live in policy, but two, just remind the board and the committee right now what's required of us per the executive order.
Sure. So let me start with why I'm not sure it should live in policy, and we can walk through kind of what we have. It's really a protocol, and the executive order and its implementing regulations advise us to establish protocols for how we're going to handle compliance with the executive order. So that's exactly what we did in crafting our protocols. And again, I think to my earlier comment, the more that you embed these in granite, the more difficult it is for you to tweak them in keeping with changes to the executive order or any of the instructions about how to comply, or even how to tweak those rules to accommodate the best interests of our employees. And we have done actually all of those things since the time the executive order came in. So that's why I think it really is a protocol by whoever it is in our organization that administers these vaccination rules and compliance with the executive order. And right now that's come out of my office. So the protocols are without regard or distinguishing between certified or non-certified staff. It's everybody. And if anything, if there are any groups to be distinguished, it's really those who are employees, and employees means every single person across the district who works for us or who volunteers for us in some cases. And the only group kind of outside of that are employees that come to us through vendors. So the vendors piece is the easiest one to deal with. We have had an outreach to as many of the vendors as we could think of. The obvious ones are people like the bus drivers. And what the order required us to do, or the implementing rules required us to do, was to ask those vendors to certify to us or to affirm that they are in compliance with the executive order. So super easy. I wrote the letter, I attached everything, all the rules and everything to it, sent it out to some of our temporary staffing agencies, the bus companies, people in Sodexo, and simply said, please affirm for us that anybody that you are sending to the Danbury Public Schools is in compliance with the executive order. And they have all done that. I think save one. I'm still waiting on one. So those are the easy folks. Those people who are in our organization, and those number about 2,000, I think we did 19 something, about 2,000, are all on a master sheet. And we did a couple of things to enroll them, basically. One is we opened up the Tyler Technologies portal, the employee portal, and we got everyone who collects a paycheck from us to set up their own individual page in their portal. And eventually we're going to use that for things like payroll stubs, insurance benefits information, all that kind of stuff that our employees can access in that one portal. But we also used it to have everyone complete a form to document for us at that moment what their vaccination status was. And what we needed to do prior to September 27th was anybody that worked for us prior to September 27th either needed to produce to us proof of full vaccination status, which is 2 weeks after your second dose, or your terminal dose. And they needed to either produce affirmative evidence of that in the form of a vaccine card, or in the alternative, they needed to have a request for an exemption from showing us proof of vaccination status. And the exemptions at that time were threefold. One was a healthcare related exemption signed by a healthcare professional who validated that the employee could not get the vaccine for medical reasons. We saw that with some people who were severely immunocompromised or who were going through chemo, who needed to wait to get that vaccination. The second category was religious exemptions. And I got a lot of those for some things that I just never thought of. So we got many of those. And the third was what I kind of snarkily call the just because exemption. It was kind of a third category or other. And it was for those people who simply refused for whatever reason, personal liberty or any other reason, to get the vaccine and show the status. That was prior to September 27th. And we collected all of those. We didn't have a whole lot of exemption requests. We had a lot of others. And we were in the process of whittling down what started as about 600 people down to a couple hundred. Those people who did not provide proof of vaccine status needed to engage in weekly testing. And there's a couple of guidelines that came out under the regulations. One was that it was not required that the district pay for it. Didn't kind of come out and say that, but what it said was the employee must submit proof of a negative test. And secondly, that test must be taken within 72 hours of reporting to work for the week. So we set that protocol up, and originally, you might remember, we had a testing window. We picked Wednesday as our day zero. So Wednesday was the day that people were going to report to work, and we went back 72 hours. So day one was Tuesday, day two was Monday, day three was Sunday. And we picked Wednesdays in order to pick a day when we did not have a heavy strain with subs, or as heavy of a strain. And it would also afford everyone one weekend day in order to be tested. We went through the first 3 weeks or so with that model. And then as the list of folks who were being tested continues to decline, it's now about 140. And I felt comfortable at that point opening up the testing window to either your day zero was Tuesday or your day zero was Wednesday. If your day zero is Tuesday, you have to test Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, submit results by Monday at 4. Or if you wanted to test them in the original scheme, you could also do that as well. The reason why that was significant, and that was one of the places where it was nice to have the latitude to tweak without going through any other more official process, was that we had a lot of people who wanted to engage in the saliva test. And there's very, very few places that do that. And they do it on Thursdays and Saturdays primarily. So that took kind of the remaining folks that were really concerned about the testing window, and it gave them that extra day, that Saturday, to be able to go ahead and go through the process. What we set up in order to be able to monitor everyone was a Google form system. Tyler did not have the capacity to do that, which was kind of one of our frustrations with the system, but we set up a Google form basically. And so folks complete the Google form and they put their name, their location, the date that they took the test, the date that the results came back, and just whether it was positive, negative, or inconclusive. We asked them to verify the validity, to swear the validity, and then to upload the test results. All of that comes into a Google Doc, and the beauty of that is it formats into an Excel sheet, and we can just look down the list and see if we have missing test results. We compare it to a master sheet to see if anybody has not communicated with us. What we've done now is anyone who does not have test results by the deadline, so it's 4 o'clock on either Monday or Tuesday, who does not have test results by the deadline, they are placed for the next day on an administrative leave without pay, pending testing. We had a lot of people who didn't go to test, and mind you, you can also do a rapid test, so you can do a quick turnaround test. Anyone that forgot, did want to go, those folks received notice, and there's a series of emails that go out like, gee, we haven't heard from you yet. Gee, we still haven't heard from you. And now tomorrow you're going to be on an administrative leave with no test results. Those people can cure by providing a test result within 72 hours in order to go back the next day. But right now we've got a team in my office that from 4 till about 7:30 at night are just reviewing to make sure they've got everybody's information in. And then they post absences into ASOP, send out an email to admin council reminding them to check their daily reports in their buildings because they may have some vacancies that need to be filled with subs. We've really gotten that list down. The place where we're still seeing kind of persistent problems are with ELP, and we're really working with those people. I've got a couple in school lunch, but it's mostly the ELP folks that we continue to kind of shepherd through. And I will tell you, our administrators were great. Sodexo has been excellent. They are literally, for those folks having trouble either remembering or getting to a test or getting the results submitted, they're really hand-holding and walking them through it, so that the system's running pretty well now. The only change to that system that will likely happen now is the executive order says, or the regulations say, testing results from a test provider are not a reason to suspend this. You can still come to work pending test results. They say if it's a test result delay that's no fault of the employee, sorry, you can't come to work. So one of the things that I negotiated just this week with Erin Daly with the teachers is that, and I think we'll roll it out across the district, is for those folks where they can establish that, for whatever reason, the test facility was swamped, they lost the test, whatever it is, we would allow them to put a sick day in rather than have an unpaid day out. They can't come to work for sure, but they would have basically a paid day while they waited for that test result to come in. I was asked, as of last Friday, all districts were asked by the State Department to submit data, which we did. It asked how many of our folks, certified and non-certified, how many are vaccinated, how many are partially vaccinated, and how many are in a testing protocol. So we submitted that data on Friday. I haven't seen any collation of the data across the districts, but I think I reported to you all that our vaccination rate is really high. It's in the low 90s percentile. So we're really, really comfortable with that. An email went out today from Kathy O'Dowd to all hands because we were starting to get some inquiries about the booster and would we be running clinics for the booster. We're not running clinics for the booster. So she put out an email today that I worked with her on that points people back to their primary care doctors who now are getting shots. They have some supplies in their primary care doctors' offices or to other providers. There are a series of no-cost test centers that are no cost by designation of the state where people can go to get the boosters and to get testing. So we've been kind of pushing that information out to people as well so they would have it. The other thing I learned from Kathy today is that I think that the attention on boosters in the health department is going to be a little bit waylaid because they are really going to focus on the elementary kid clinics now. So they are, now that the approval has been made for the vaccine, they're going to really work on making sure, I know Cara Prunty is working on making sure they get the doses and that they're made available to our families. So they're going to really focus on running the student clinics now. So we'll continue from my office working with Kathy to try to point people in the direction of where they can get a booster and where they can get testing. So it's a lot of information. That's why I think it doesn't live in policy so much because it just changes literally. It changes in reaction to the governor's order. It changes in reaction to just the healthcare system and the health department. And it also changes, there was a lot of really loud people with the saliva testing. And that was really what motivated the opening of the window a little bit more when we were comfortable we could monitor it all. So I think we're running really smoothly now. The trick now is just to keep people complying with the testing by that 4 o'clock window so that we're not chasing people down at 9 o'clock at night, or, that's the other piece we're just trying to keep a handle on.
That's great. Thank you, Kim. I had no idea there was a saliva test.
Yeah. There's a saliva test. You spit in a tube. I know one just anecdotally, because I know my son had one where you ordered the kit. The test tube came to your house, and then you got on a Zoom meeting with a nurse, and the nurse watched you spit in the tube. And then you put the top on and you twisted it, and blue dye went into it, and you put it in a box and you FedExed it back, and they had the results overnight.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's a lab out of Brantford that's doing them now. And, for people who don't want to have
Yeah.
the thing stuck up their
Yeah.
nose, it's been great. I'm hoping it'll be a little more widespread. And I think there's also an inside of your cheek one as well now.
Mm.
So the only thing we can't take are the home tests because they can't verify that you're the one who took it.
Yeah. Great. Anything from committee members on this? No. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So with that, is there anything more, Kevin, that you wanted to
Yes.
talk about?
So just a reminder for the committee, this seems like ages ago. We partnered with CABE during the beginning of the 2021 school year to fold in our policies in the platform, so it's managed a little bit more efficiently for our families. The majority of our policies have been updated, and they are indeed reflected in the new platform on the website. However, there are policies that were approved during the 18, 19, and 1920 school year that are not reflected there. So we just have a little bit of scrubbing left to do just to make sure they're all updated and actually in the platform. I believe there's only maybe a handful, less than 10, but I think more than 5 policies that are still outstanding. So we just want to confirm that with CABE. And then, we have a number of policies that have been, whether it be required, recommended, or, recommended / something policies boards should consider. It's been a while since we revisited those policies, given these last 18 months. So will be an opportunity to, number one, I can kind of give the board an update on if the CABE policies on our website have all been updated, so I can provide that verification at our next meeting. And then just kind of share, as per the audit from CABE some time ago, just kind of where we are in that audit process, and just kind of, catch the committee up of, where we were, prior to the audit, and kind of the gains we've made, and, kind of what's kind of outstanding. You might recall, Rachel, the majority of our required policies, those boxes were checked. However, we did have, a couple of policies that are recommended that the board really should consider. One of them, my favorite one is the board, being able to participate in meetings remotely. Those are the kind of policies that were recommended. And, certainly boards had the options, but they were not required. So there's a lot of those type of policies that are out there, I think, that the board might want to consider moving forward.
So no required. Did I hear that correctly? There are no additional required?
Right. So when we had that audit done, the required policies, we placed up at the front of that process. And so if there are any outstanding policies that are still required that we haven't done, I'll make sure that's made available for the committee.
For our next meeting? Okay, great. Which is on November 30th. Because our annual meeting is on December 1st.
That is correct.
Does anybody know when new board members will be sworn in? Because I thought it was around that time.
I thought it was January.
I think it's earlier because we have our,
No, it's in December.
It's gotta be December, yeah.
December.
Right, because you do your board elections,
Right.
officer elections at that December meeting,
1st, yep, December 1st, yep.
before you let anybody eat anything.
Anyway. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Kathy,
I'll second.
Second.
by Kate, all in favor.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you all. Thank you.